Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Doctor Lawyer Breakdown, a show with a unique perspective about everything from the mundane to the arcane. I'm your host, Bradford Keaty, and joining me again for part 2 of our black box breakdown is Dr. Joseph Ramos.
Once again, I love the fist bump at the start.
Yeah,
good to be here with you, my friend.
I'm excited to wrap up a couple of questions that I've been thinking about since our last episode. Okay, so the one that I want to start off at the top with has to do with these things we see on TV all the time, right? There's medications and they run through it feels like they're speaking to you in fine print, right?
Yes.
This could cause this or that.
Yes.
Does this tie into the black box concept?
Spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, great question, great pickup. It's exactly what it is. Because you'll hear these ads and they pretty much say, the fine print, as you say, at the end of the ad is, this can cause allergic reactions, anaphylaxis, severe infections, loss of immune system, and death.
Right.
And then you're like, why the hell would anybody take that? Well, essentially, what they've recited to you is the black box. Now, you might go, why would somebody take that? And that becomes a risk-benefit analysis of the doctor with the patient and explaining to them.
Okay. But if they're saying these things and that's part of the black box, does that mean that's happened in the testing?
Yes.
Okay, so we know that this has occurred. It's not a question.
It's not a maybe.
Okay.
They've studied thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, and thousands have had those reactions that they're announcing. When you hear anaphylaxis, death, infection, loss of your immune system, thousands of people have suffered those in the studies. And that's why they're saying that literally in the TV commercial.
And maybe it's because I remember seeing it ever since I was a kid. And we're just inundated with in American TV. But you have to remember that this is not it might. It's no, this happened. And this is why you have to, they make it sound so casual, like, hey, don't worry about it. But you've got to talk to your doctor about these sorts of things.
Yeah, and the common question that comes out of that is, everybody always goes, I'm sure you've probably thought of this as you brought this up, why in the hell would you take that medicine after those things, especially now knowing it's happened to thousands of people?
Right.
Here's the reason. The common one is cancer medicines. You'll see cancer medicines advertised on TV. Talk to your doctor about such and such. They're really doing a risk-benefit analysis. They're saying, look, that cancer is going to kill that person. This medicine could kill that person. Can we get the medicine? This medicine happens to also kill the cancer.
Right.
We got a triangle here. Can we get the medicine to kill the cancer before it kills the person? And it's a race to the bottom. When you're taking a chemotherapeutic agent, as one of these examples of the black box warnings, you're really taking something to kill yourself. Right. It is killing your good parts of your body too. That's why people lose their hair, they vomit, they lose their GI tract, they sometimes have bloody stools, they have GI bleeds. It's killing you. You're just hoping it kills the bad thing before it kills you. Because if it kills off all the bad cells, you can stop it, start regenerating all good cells again and be healthy and happy again, but disease-free.
Right.
And that's what the doctors explain to people who see those ads on television that come in. They go, I hear there's this new medicine for this cancer, and it said all these things, but why would I take that? And
right.
The doctor says that to them because it's very effective at killing these cancer cells.
So there's other heavy medications and I'm using the word heavy, what I really probably should say is dangerous medications, where even though they're black boxed and even though they're on there, they can have very specific positive effects if your body has the prerequisites or meets the criteria for this to be an effective opportunity for you. Yeah,
like many of those cancers from the cancer meds, for example, the cancers will have particular kind of spike proteins or signals on them is an easy way to put it.
Okay.
And a specific chemotherapeutic agent might be really specific at killing that signal. So it's very good at killing the bad cells. And so, they're very good at what they do. They're unfortunately too good, and sometimes they kill the bystanders, which are the good cells. And there's medicines that are not so toxic when you get to black box warnings that we still have to be careful of. Levaquin, or ciprofloxacin, Cipro, as people have heard it. Those are two antibiotics in the same class of fluoroquinolones. They tend to cause disruption of type 2 collagen fibers. And type 2 collagen is like what we find in our Achilles.
Oh.
And so people can take an antibiotic and then months later suffer a tendon tear.
Wild.
Because it affects the collagen deposition there. That's an example where something has a black box label that could commonly affect the common person in a bad way, but it's not going to kill them.
Right. Well, and so that was the next thing I was going to get into. And your doctor understands, this guy's very active, maybe a football player, a hockey player, so I do some sort of sports, and I've got him on this antibiotic. When it comes to doing our 4 steps of the doctor fulfilling their duty, they need to know about this patient's normal everyday activity, et cetera, to say, hey, you're a football player, you're a 20-year-old, a college football player, right?
Yep.
When I'm going to give you this antibiotic, there's a chance that it could impact your what did you say is type 2 collagen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and so like you're introducing a risk of like an Achilles tear, which could be a career, and the doctor has to talk to them about these things before they prescribe them.
And this is spot on. This is so informative. If you're listening to this right now, what Bradford has just touched on is so informative, because this is where the duty, breach, causation, damages, where doctors have a duty to explain, doctors have a duty to think. I have a duty to explain to you what your alternatives are. I'll give you an example. So, we have several pro athletes that the firm takes care of. Some for the Denver Broncos, some that you'll actually probably see on this podcast here.
I hope so.
You and I'll probably
you grill somebody in the professional scene. All right.
We'll have a couple of them on that are players to talk with us. And let's just say that one of those players came to me and had a urinary tract infection. Ciprofloxacin and levofloxacin are very good at killing urinary tract bugs. Okay, if I put them on that, I'd be treating their urinary tract infection right. But they're a pro football player.
Yeah.
What if they go tear an Achilles? Who has a higher risk? Who's constantly under, planting, flexing, pushing, exploding than a football player?
Yeah, we saw a bunch of them get torn last year before in the NFL.
Terrible choice to put any pro football player on that to kill that bug when there are other drugs available. I can kill the same thing with Bacterial. I can kill the same urinary tract pathogen, even with cephalexin, as simple as some of the different cephalosporin class. Yeah. There's different classes of antibiotics that don't cause tendon tear. So if I didn't explain to that person, and that there were good alternatives.
Right. Then you're not fulfilling that duty.
That's right.
That's and there's a chance for malpractice.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to, super interesting. Yeah. When it comes to that concept of malpractice, every situation we've talked about so far, you're my doctor and you sit down and you talk to me about it. And you say, here are the alternatives and here are the other things. You're an emergency medicine doctor. Right. What do you do if the person's unconscious? Like, how do you go about treating somebody when they can't respond, when you got minutes, seconds to make decisions?
Yeah, that happens when you work in level 1 trauma centers, which I did pretty much for my entire career. That's an every night thing where people can't respond. You don't have any history on them. You don't know exactly that. That's where the medical bracelets came out for diabetics.
Yes.
You see a bracelet, you go, oh, hold on, right? Or a severe allergy. They might wear a peanut allergy, things that can kill you like that. But it's rare that people have that, but it's common that you can't talk or communicate with them and nobody's available to give you any history.
Right.
And the duty becomes very simple then, is to preserve life. So you do the very best you can do without the one-offs. In other words, yes, could this medicine hypothetically have the black box warning of X? Yes, but does this medicine still exist and hasn't been banned because it has tremendous effects for what I need here in this resuscitation? Yes, you use it.
Okay.
So the first and foremost, you try to preserve life, and that's you full court press. You do everything you can possibly do. And if an adverse event results as a result of that, that's not malpractice, because you did the best you could do with what you had to try to preserve life.
Okay, so the standard in that space, when the person is not able to understand what, or for you to give them alternatives, the legal standard is you have to do your best to preserve life. Yep, and we talked last week about case law and how the way that gets built is ruling stacks on top of another ruling, stacks on top of another ruling, and it gets us to where we are now.
That's right.
So, that experience in the medical side and also in the legal side, the concept of being able to inform to avoid malpractice is, as long as you're preserving life when they can't respond, you're cleared.
That's right. That's right. You're clear. It's the same thing as, why could I prescribe your family member, if a family member has cancer, why can I prescribe them this drug that has a history of anaphylaxis, aplastic anemia, and death?
Right.
The reason is because I've informed them that their best possible chance at survival is actually that drug. Because the other thing, if I could inform them, is, hey, this showed in studies that killed the cancer the best.
Right.
So as long as you're doing your very best, you will tolerate some risk. And for a doctor resuscitating an unresponsive patient, you're tolerating some risk.
Some serious risk.
Some serious risk, but you're doing your absolute best to preserve life. And remind me, because when you talk about this later show, this just struck me. It's not for today, but this is a great topic. Because this is the more common one. It's not a black box warning on a medicine. It's what happens when you start resuscitating somebody and you intubate them and you put a central line in them and you're pumping blood products in them, and the family runs in the room in the emergency department because they lagged, the ambulance beat them there. And they run, they say, no, they have do not resuscitate orders. DNR. Living, you've heard, right? Medical power of attorney. DNRs. That's a whole show.
Okay.
And now that
We got to have producer Gabe write that one down.
Write that down.
DNRs.
Producer Gabe.
Okay, for a breakdown.
That one hits doctors a lot, and you want to talk about kind of a gentle area.
Yeah,
You're
no
resuscitating someone, trying to preserve life at all costs, but they've got a written directive: don't do it.
Interesting.
But you didn't know it when you started.
That is definitely in the zip code of the intersection between medicine and law. We will get to that one.
That's a good one.
Okay, so in the situation where the person can't respond, you've got to do your best to preserve life. And you're already able to fulfill that duty when you're able to communicate with somebody.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of things that I wanted to cover on the black box medicine space. But it's been getting me thinking over the last week about the 4 steps for medical duty, right? Or the 4 steps of malpractice.
Yeah.
You've got to see these all the time.
Yeah.
You're the doctor lawyer.
Yeah.
So there has to be something that sticks out in your mind with your time working at Ramos Law and operating Ramos Law. Like, what's one that sticks out to you that's interesting? Like, let's talk about a case.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, there's so many interesting cases. There's a case that's really fresh on my mind. Yeah, I could write a book about this.
I believe it.
Literally, because, those places. We see and help so many people at Ramos Law, and we see all different things that have happened, from airplane crashes to people getting frauded on credit, to malpractice, as we're talking, to insurance bad faith, just a whole spectrum. So there's always fascinating cases. Here's a fascinating case. Now, this is not malpractice.
Okay.
I'm going to give you one that's not malpractice. I know it's a little bit off what you asked, but it's fresh on my mind, is why I want to share it with you, because it's a perfect intersection of law and medicine, and this may spark some thoughts in you. So we had a case that came to us, and I'm not talking about this case to downplay the other law firm and to upplay us. But it was just a perfect intersection of medicine and law where it worked out that way.
Right.
And what it was, we had a case that came to us. They'd got a $25,000 offer on the table, and there was $200,000 insurance policy. And the family was unhappy that they weren't getting the full amount of the insurance policy, and they fired the other attorneys and they came to us.
Okay.
And what the issue was, where the intersection of law and medicine came into this case, it was really fascinating, was that the person had had a car crash, a relatively minor car crash. About a 70-year-old gentleman had been rear-ended, and he had back and neck pain. Everybody who's in their 70s has degenerative changes of their spine.
Right.
Right? We all get arthritis with time, arthritis in the spine. He had some arthritis in his spine. He had back pain. And he went in and ended up, after a couple weeks of therapy, he wasn't getting better. So they did an epidural on him. And an epidural is given into the spine, in the space above where your vertebral bodies and your discs sit. There's a space in there, and you put medicine in that space, and it kind of goes up and down. It usually has a steroid in it and an anesthetic in it.
Okay.
And it takes away pain in the spine. And then a lot of times when it takes away that pain, particularly pain caused by discs that are injured, people can move and exercise and use their muscles and stretch, and they can recover with then physical therapy. It's hard to recover when you have pain. Anyway, long story short, person had been in a minor mechanism motor vehicle crash, had back pain, got an epidural steroid injection, and about 36 to 48 hours after the injection, started to have fever, started to get chills, started to feel very sick, then started to have altered mental status, where they're seeing things and talking strange and not recognizing people, and then had fever. And associated with that, you can see there's a sick picture for me.
Significant.
Yeah. Then had fever, then had a seizure, fell, got a skull fracture, and a brain bleed.
Wow.
What? Is this not a book?
Well, the first thing I'm thinking is, what happened after that epidural?
Right. So this is exactly what the family said.
Yeah.
So they went to this other law firm, and they said, hey, he was fine until he had this epidural.
Yeah.
This has to be from this epidural, and that epidural's from the car crash. So there's no way from the car crash we're accepting $25,000.
Right.
No way. If there's $200,000 in insurance, we want it all.
Right.
Our dad has brain damage. He's on a ventilator. He's had a skull fracture. This is
it's all
terrible.
started 48 hours after the epidural.
That's right. So the law firm said, the insurance has given us. This is the other law firm. They said, they're giving us problems that the epidural wasn't even necessary from the crash because he had degenerative changes in his spine.
Right.
Much less you trying to hook that to a fall with a skull fracture, the insurance is saying, he's just an old guy who fell.
Right.
The family's like, no. He was sick with fever and a seizure and fell.
Right.
Those attorneys fought the insurance fought back. Pretty quick, the attorney said, we're not going to try this case. We're not going to take this case to court because we'll lose. Mm-hmm. The clients left there and they came to us. Okay, so here, I love this. I get into this.
I know.
Okay.
I can see it on your face when we talk about this stuff. I love getting to ask you these kinds of questions.
It walked in, and this wasn't a jumbled up ball of dots, as we say here, that can't be connected. It was clear as day.
Yeah.
What happens is, I said, oh, well, he probably had a meningitis. The family was very informed because they talked to other lawyers about it. They said, nope, he didn't have any bacteria. They did a spinal tap. He didn't have any bacteria in there. And there's some other parameters they check or something. They said none of those were there if it wasn't meningitis. I said, I don't know, he had meningitis. He had a chemical meningitis. They're like, what? I'm like, this is classic. So what happens is when you give someone an epidural, there are preservatives and stuff within the medicine. And some of them are even just natural things like, sugars and things like that. But the long story short is that nothing just goes in as just the medicine. There's carrier molecules.
Right,
okay?
yes.
They sometimes use stuff like grapeseed oil. They use, there's different carrier molecules for everything.
Right.
And in some of the carriers, and it just so happens with steroids, and with some of the anesthetics, both of which he is given, there are carrier molecules that when they go in, you put the medicine into that space that's right by the spine. In some situations, those can migrate into the subarachnoid space.
Hold on, what's the subarachnoid space?
Oh, yeah. So what happens is that when you give the injection, you give it in one space that's above where all the structures are.
Okay.
So imagine layers. Let me explain this a little better. Imagine 3 layers, 3 walls, and there's water in each wall, like cell.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
You go through one and you give it into this one.
Into the middle one.
Yeah.
Okay.
The space below that, and that space, that middle space you give it into, is what helps relieve the pain, take the inflammation stuff. But stuff can migrate across that space to the inner space.
Okay.
It's called the subarachnoid space.
Subarachnoid
It's not
space.
supposed to be in there. Not supposed to be there. So it gets there 2 ways, either through puncture, where the doctor does it, or it gets there because the medicine migrates across.
Like osmosis sort of making it through that barrier.
Exactly.
Okay.
It just crosses, just like our water crosses when we drink it in our belly, and it crosses over into our cells.
Yeah, okay.
Same type of a thing.
So the carrier molecules in either the steroid or the anesthesia moved from the center where it was placed across that wall into the subarachnoid space. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. See, I'm learning. I'm learning.
You're
I'm trying
over
here.
MD right here.
Okay.
So when that gets in there, you can get an arachnoiditis, which is an inflammation of the lining of your neurologic system. You can develop fever, stiff neck, altered mental status, everything he had, the exact picture he had. And what happens when you start to get a fever or you get altered mental status or your entire inflammation of your neurologic system, you have a seizure.
Yeah.
And what happens when you seize? You fall to the ground. When you fall to the ground, you break your skull and you bleed into your brain sometimes, unfortunately, like what happened to this gentleman.
Right.
So to me, I looked at this case and I said, this is clear. I'm like, this is like, are you kidding me? File this case tomorrow. I can't wait to see them in court.
Yeah.
So...
Well, hold on, because meningitis is, you said it's chemical meningitis.
Yes.
So,
yeah,
because regular meningitis, it sounds like they tested for all that and they didn't see it.
That's right. So I'm so glad you brought that back because I just remembered at the same time you did.
Yeah.
So when they actually tested him to see if he had meningitis, because he had fever and altered mental status, so all the doctors are thinking, hey, I think he's had a bacterial meningitis.
Right.
When you draw that fluid out, you look for bacteria, you gram stain it, all normal. None
No
there.
bacteria.
Right.
Well, of course there's no bacteria.
Because it's a chemical meningitis.
Wow.
So basically, he had suffered a chemical meningitis that led to this series of events, and that related directly back to that epidural and related directly back to that car crash.
Yeah.
And that was game, set, match. So we got a hold of the insurance company, said, you have one chance. We're going to file the case. The reason we do that in law, and this is a great cross between law and medicine. The reason we do that in law is because if insurance companies settle within their policy limits, you buy a certain level of insurance. When you went to buy your car insurance, you can buy $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever. You never know who's going to hit you. They could have bought the minimum.
Yeah.
So you can protect yourself by buying your own insurance. And this family had done that. The person who had hit them had the $25,000 policy. They'd actually bought $200,000, and that's what the insurance wouldn't budge on.
Okay.
the insurance is capped at paying that amount. They don't have to pay outside of what you paid for, unless you've given them everything, you've shown them everything, and they still say, prove it. Then whatever you prove, whatever damages come out, they have to pay.
Okay, so if they have a chance to pay the limits, and they got to pay the limits, and if you say, hey, I prove to you that I'm owed the entirety of the limits that I paid for, if they give it to you, we're all square.
We can't go after them for more.
But if they say, no, we still don't think that's enough, we're going to pay less than the limits, then you sue them, and that's what, is that what happened here?
That's exactly what happened here. So I valued this case probably in excess of $1 million. So I wanted them to say, no, we're not going to pay you. Because I wanted to sue them and get excess above that 200. But what had happened was you have to give them everything. You can't play hide the ball.
Right.
You share all the information. They have a reasonable chance to say yes or no. And so we said, here's all the stuff. They said, it's not a meningitis because look, there's no bacteria there. I said, yeah, you're right. It's a chemical meningitis. Look up the preservative that carries in the steroid he was given. Look up the preservative and anesthetic he was given. Look at the medical literature. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It crosses into the space. It can cross into that subarachnoid space. And so it absolutely was that. And so there's your chance. There's all the information. They took a couple days, got back to us and said, we'll go ahead and pay you the policy.
We'll go ahead and pay for this one.
So we didn't get to knock that one out of the park. But the reason that felt good and the reason that one jumped out at me was you talked about the intersection of law and medicine.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
Dude, that's it. That's what it's all about. And that's fair. And that's right, and that family got justice.
Yeah.
And can you imagine? They knew. They just knew it. And they were right. They just didn't know the medicine behind it.
Right.
And they didn't know the law and how the two would come together behind it. And unfortunately for the other law firm, neither did they. But fortunately for us, we did. And I love that. That's what makes part of what makes this part of my career so fulfilling. And
I love getting to draw that kind of passion out of you because, I get real nerdy in my spare time too, but I see this, like, you appreciate the complexities of both of those things. And so getting to use those talents at this intersection and, the skills that you've gained, it's awesome. And I love to get to ask you about this kind of stuff.
I'd be totally bummed if I went to school for all those years of, undergraduate and medical school and internship and residency and then didn't use it anymore in any way. What a bummer. But for me, it's just so fulfilling because it's not. I use it every day, every case. There's medicine involved in every injury pretty much around here that we deal with. And so, man, it's like having my own little ER here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Well, hey, speaking of the ER, because we're going to sign off on this one, wrap up part 2. I was thinking about there's probably a ton of medical procedures that you've completed in your 15 years, and especially in trauma, right? There's all sorts of stuff that you got to do to do your best to try and save that person's life.
That's right.
But I wanted to know, for the audience, a little bit of audience participation.
Okay.
Give us a couple choices. Okay. What is a procedure that you've always wanted to do but never had the chance?
A procedure I've always wanted to do and I never had a chance. And you want me to give you, I'll give you 3 choices. 2 of them I've done.
Okay.
1 of them I haven't done.
Perfect.
Okay, so put a bolt, it's called a bolt, into someone's head to relieve the pressure so that their brain doesn't herniate.
Wow.
What happens is that if you are building up cerebrospinal fluid in the brain due to pressure, like from trauma, it'll build up there and it starts to push your brain down and basically kills you. Because it's where you become brain dead and the rest of your body's good. To relieve that pressure in an emergency, a bolt is put into the head and it's left there. You take fluid out and you also monitor pressures through it. Okay. So that's a procedure.
What's it called? A bolt?
Yeah.
It's literally just a bolt.
Intracranial pressure monitoring via a bolt. Okay. Second procedure is opening up the pericardial sac, which is the heart. There's a sac around the heart. And it can get fluid in it, and it can cause pressure. And that pressure is called a tamponade. And it will squeeze, in other words, so imagine a heart inside of a sac.
Right.
And if fluid gets between the heart wall and the sac wall,
then the heart can't move.
It builds up pressure, and then the heart can't pump. It's called a pericardial tamponade.
Pericardial tamponade, okay.
Yeah, and it's basically pressure on the heart that prevents it from beating.
Gotcha.
So you have to open up their chest and you have to open up the heart sac and get the pressure out of there. Okay. That's a second procedure.
Okay.
And the third procedure is a diaphragm rupture. Sometimes people will get into a car crash and they get major trauma, like, they get hit, and our diaphragms are right below our lungs. And we expand our chest. There's the muscle that goes down and up and down and up in there, keep the lungs pumping. And that can rupture. And if that ruptures, obviously your lung can't even really go down and expand correctly. It'll start dipping down in your abdomen. And that has to be repaired sometimes. And that's an opening and a repair of a diaphragm rupture.
Yeah, it feels like you got to really get in there.
Yep, get in the belly and fix that rupture. So relieve fluid. So choices are bolt in the head to relieve pressure in the head. Open the heart to relieve pressure on the heart.
Okay.
Open the abdomen to make it where that lung can come up and close because the diaphragm is torn. Fix that torn diaphragm. Okay. Those are the three.
I'm going to guess B, the pericardial tamponade.
Okay.
That's my guess, is the one that you haven't done. Now, they all sound incredibly interesting. From a medical mind and knowing about the human body and having a chance to be in trauma, I'm sure you would want to perform all of those. Yeah. But I'm going to guess B, the pericardial tamponade.
Okay, you're going for the heart. You're saying that's one that I would like to do that I haven't done.
You haven't had a chance to.
All right.
And audience, play along. A, B, or C. Drop your what you think in the comments. But thank you again for joining us, Dr. Ramos, for your perspective, your expertise. I can't wait for the next breakdown.
Nice. Looking forward to it. Enjoyed being with you today.
Me too. Thank you. And audience, we enjoyed having you here. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.